Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. This is semi-homesteading with Abby, which basically means I'm trying to learn all the homesteading skills without having a full-blown homestead. This week I wanted to talk to you all about harvesting honey. This was quite the mountain for me to climb, and it was very hard to find just beginner information about harvesting honey, just a basic guide of the things that you're going to need. If you're an amateur beekeeper like myself, I've been doing it for 2 summers now, but if you're an amateur beekeeper, you may know it's really hard to get just basic information about bees out there. There's a lot of information. It's not for lack of information. It's just that a lot of it is conflicting, or you have to understand it feels like you have to understand so much about bees to even do basic tasks, to do hive checks. It gets overwhelming pretty quickly. So I wanted to put this video out to just provide you with a very basic harvesting guide if you're a beginner. If you feel like you may not know every single thing there is about bees, if you're intimidated to harvest your honey from your honey super, just know I was in the same boat. I did harvest honey this year, but that's pretty much because I just jumped right in, but really just tried it out and I learned a few things. So I wanted to put this video out in order to help you if you have yet to harvest your honey. So let's get right into it. This is a beginner beekeeper's guide to harvesting honey. First, I'm going to go over the equipment that you're going to need because it's important to have things prepared. I sort of did this last minute and realized I didn't have some things, made some emergency trips to the store. It's much better if you're prepared from the beginning. You can order some stuff in advance before you harvest your honey. If not, a lot of just hardware stores around probably has something similar you could use, but I'm going to link all the products in the description below and we'll go over each one of the products. I'm going to keep it very simple with the products to get. There's 2 things to buy, and the first one is the extractor. Now, technically, you don't have to buy this. I talk about this at the end of the video, that a lot of beekeeping clubs have this. We'll lend it out, we'll rent it out, so you don't necessarily need to buy this, but if you're going to buy an extractor, this is a good one. It says it's currently unavailable. I think it's going to be back in stock soon, or you can get a similar one if you desire, but this is a good one. It has good reviews, and I got the manual one, so I didn't have to worry about plugging in an electric one during the harvest. The second thing you're going to want to get is this kit. Now, it has a bucket, it has a filter, it has all the stuff that you're going to need to harvest. This is a kit that will run you about $95, but it has everything. It has the spouts for the buckets, it has a little shelf to hold your frames while you uncap the honeycomb, which we'll go over, but this is a really great kit that was super useful for us. Okay, now let's go over my honey harvest and we'll walk through each step, how you use each one of the products that I listed because they each have a purpose. You don't need a whole lot to harvest honey, but let's walk through what happened during my own honey harvest because it's really honestly not as hard or not as bad as you may think. I made a couple of mistakes, which I'll point out along the way so you can avoid those pitfalls. So actually a couple weeks before I wanted to go harvest my honey, I went out and did what I call a lazy check of my hive. I was not honestly very thorough. I literally just lifted up a couple honey super frames, looked kind of at the top. I didn't even take them fully out. I just wanted to take a quick peek. I wouldn't recommend that. Take out your honey supers out fully to inspect them because what I saw was the entire top of my frames capped. I thought I had completely capped frames in my honey super. That was not the case. When I went out a couple weeks later to actually harvest my honey, I lifted them out and I realized only that top section was actually capped. The bottom was completely uncapped. Now, I had assumed that all of my honey was capped, so I didn't do a lot of research beforehand about what to do if it's not capped. In the spur of the moment, I already had every single thing set up. I was ready to go. My aunt was over here helping me harvest. I said, let's just harvest. Worst case, I waste a little bit of honey. I didn't know there were almost 2 gallons of honey in the hive, or just over 2 gallons, so it would have actually kind of been a bigger deal than I thought to waste the honey, but I just said, okay, let's just go ahead and harvest them. Now, in hindsight, this was probably not a great idea. What you need to do if they are uncapped is buy a refractor tool, and I will link that below. It's not very expensive, but you can dig out some of the honey in one of the uncapped cells and test the moisture content of your honey. And I will put a video about how to do that here. You can see you just put a little dollop of honey onto the little screen, close the close the glass on top of it, and it has a line that shows you your moisture content for your honey. Now, in order to not ferment or turn into mead or anything like that, you need your honey moisture content to be under 18.6%. So I actually tested my moisture content after I had harvested all my honey, and it was just under 16%, so it turned out well. Part of that is because I live in a very dry climate. I'm in Colorado. Apparently, if I were to live in a more humid climate, those uncapped cells may not be at the right moisture content to harvest. So just be careful about that before you actually harvest. If you have a lot of uncapped cells, you're going to either need to wait for the bees to cap them or test your moisture content. If it's fine, go ahead and harvest. If it's not, you can take your whole frame, and there's ways to dehydrate the uncapped cells. Some people like dry it out with fans or leave it air drying for a while. There's different methods, so you might have to Google, if your moisture content is too high on those cells. You might have to Google different ways to do that, but mine was fine. So make sure you either test the moisture and it's okay, or you test the moisture, it's too high, and you take some steps to mitigate that, or just wait till 90% of your honeycomb is capped. We went down to the hive, we took out our frames. I was honestly really freaked out about the next part, which was shaking all of the bees from the frame into the hive. It wasn't that bad. They actually, I thought it was gonna be kind of a lie that they didn't care to be shaken off into the hive. They really didn't. I shook them off. They went back down into the hive. I either used a bee brush to comb off the rest of the bees that wanted to stick on there, or they don't like the carbon dioxide in your breath, so you could just blow on the bees and they'll leave. I quickly then, once there were no bees on the frame, just stuck it into one of our nuke boxes that we got the frames in. You can use like any Tupperware or big container, and sealed up the lid so no more bees would try to go back on those frames. Again, this part seemed so much more intimidating than it ended up being, so don't be too afraid of it. Smoke your bees for sure, but once you've smoked them, it should be totally fine. Okay, once we had all of our frames in our boxes, we came back up to my patio where I had set up a tarp and the extractor and the buckets and the filters and all of those things. Now is the time that you're going to uncap all of your honey. So you're going to take each frame and set it on either the nuke box or, this could get a little sticky. It wasn't overly sticky, honestly, but you're going to want another container to hold all of the caps. So you're going to take your uncapping tool and just uncap the entire frame, front and back. And you're going to set each super frame into the extractor. Now, an important note, if you are a beginner beekeeper, don't harvest, or at least what I've heard is I wouldn't harvest any of the bottom frames. You only want to harvest the shallow honey super frame. The bees are going to need the lower honey for the winter, so you're not going to want to harvest those. Okay, so from here it's pretty simple. You just put the frames in the extractor, you crank it up, make it all spin, the honey flies out. You're going to need to rotate each frame so that the honey on the other side is also extracted, so that's just a note. You're gonna have to do it twice per frame. I did that with all 8 of my frames, and honey just was going everywhere inside the extractor. So I did let it sit for like probably 15 to 20 minutes to just let all the honey drip to the bottom. And then all you do from there is really just put your filter on top of your food grade bucket, tip the extractor, and pour your honey out through the filter into the bucket. From there, we had a bucket with a spout, so we just were able to open the spout and pour our honey into our prepared mason jars. You can prepare mason jars any way you want, boiling them or anything like that, but I just put them in the dishwasher. They cooled down and I just threw my honey in there. I put my honey frames back in the super for a while to see if they'll make any more honey, but once that's finished, I'm going to take the honey super off for the winter, scrape all of the honeycomb off of each frame and melt that down to do beeswax candles. You can really harvest both the honey and the wax. Also, some people harvest, I know, the propolis. I will tell you that this is one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, to have a hive that I've installed and that I've somewhat kept alive. I mean, I don't check them that often, so they're kind of doing their own thing out there, but I've hosted these bees, and now they've made this surplus of honey, and I'm just taking enough for myself and they have enough, and they'll get through winter. And it's just so exciting to be able to do this whole process, see it all, extract the honey. And we got over 2 gallons of honey for my harvest. My aunt, I think, got about 1 gallon out of hers. It is just the best thing. And it was so interesting because I had a little neighborhood beekeeping meeting, and we all brought our honey that we had harvested, and even people that are 4 doors down from me or 5 doors down from me, we got drastically different colors of honey. And bees just go so far to get their flowers and to get their pollen, and it's just so interesting that hives within a close proximity can still have honey that's drastically different colors, slightly different moisture contents. All these things can vary by hive, even if they're close together. So it's just so fascinating, so fun. I just highly recommend doing this. If you are new, again, don't be intimidated. I would also recommend, if you're new, if you don't have an extractor, try to find a local beekeeping club, because many times I've heard of people borrowing or renting them from the beekeeping club, or a lot of times they have harvest meetings. So if you get your frames out and in a box, you can just take all the frames over to a beekeeping meeting and they have like an extracting party right there. I know that that's pretty common. So if you're still intimidated after this video, after this guide, that's okay. Try to find a local beekeeper that can help you, a local beekeeping club, a friend who's done it before. Feel free to leave comments on this video asking for questions or anything like that. I'm not an expert, but hopefully there are some experts who may watch this who can give their advice. That is all for this week's video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this helped you in your beekeeping journeys. Again, I will tell you, it's like the best thing ever, the most rewarding feeling ever, is to like grow your own food in a garden or harvest your own honey. Just all of these homesteading skills have brought me so much fulfillment and joy, and I just am loving every minute of it. So I hope you have the same experience. Let me know how your harvest goes, and I will see you next time for another video. Bye everyone.